Well, welcome back to another episode of Get to Know Your Wedding Pro. I am so excited today. We have Jolly Sienda here. She's a photographer out of Bremerton. Exciting. We seem to be building on that side now, right? One refers another, and that's great. It's so funny. People reach out and they're like, well, are you sure you want to do this? Or, when are we going to do this? Or I'm like, I publish one of these every single week. So whether it's someone new like you coming on, which I very much appreciate. So that's the thing. I tell people just today, I said, we didn't have anyone else. Here is a re-airing of Jeff Evans was just on. He was a magician, and we re-aired his today. So yes, every week we air one. So I thank you so much. Jolly, why don't you introduce yourself? Tell us who you are and just a little bit about what you do.
Great, Reed. Well, thanks so much for having me on today. I'm based in East Bremerton. I'm a professional photographer. I come from a background in communications and public relations, and that got me into event photography. And I actually started in Germany when I was stationed overseas with my former military husband. And then we got relocated to the Washington, D.C. area. And I sidelined at night, moonlighted as a photographer, and then did communications, public relations during the day. So that's what got me into it. I met a photographer at an event, at a ballooning event, and he and I struck up a conversation. This was in Virginia, and he said, I can tell you're pretty good. You live in Northern Virginia. We kind of got friendly a little bit, and he said, would you like to shoot some weddings with me? And I said, oh my gosh, I would love to shoot weddings. And I don't have any experience at it. This was back in 2006. And he said, well, I can teach you, and I need a second shooter, and I can see you have a different eye, and you look at things differently a little bit, as I was sharing some photographs that I had done of the balloons alongside him. And we started working together, and I became his second shooter. And then from that, I gained the confidence and experience to start my own business. So it's nice to work with somebody that's already in the industry, Reed, that knows what they're doing. And so I was pretty well established in the Washington, D.C. area. But my life partner and I decided that we wanted a different change of pace. And I'm from Seattle originally. Born and raised, but marrying a military guy years ago, we went on the road, went overseas, all of that kind of stuff, and then landed at the Pentagon, that sort of thing. And I never thought I'd come back to Washington State. We'll never say never. Yeah. So back in July of 2015, we decided to roll the dice. We kind of closed our life in the Washington, D.C. area, sold our house, all that kind of stuff, moved to Bremerton, bought a great place. Loved it, restarted my business. And fortunately, I was in the position that I didn't have to go work for somebody else. I could work full time as a photographer, and I've been doing that ever since. And I specialize in weddings and events and engagements and lifestyle portraiture. And I also do commercial work as well. I'm a writer as well, so I kind of fit photojournalism in that sort of segue of telling a love story of a couple that's starting from engagement, getting married, has a family, all that kind of stuff. It goes together. So it's a lot of fun, and I really enjoy it.
Yeah, and what I really like about it, the photojournalism aspect, I too, I studied broadcast and everything, right, and worked in news for a while. And, we talked before we started recording, every videographer is different, every photographer, florist, whatever you have it. And it's interesting to me, I approach weddings very, very different as someone that's, tends to be more photojournalist than if you were, let's say, someone that did commercial work, primarily for a long time, right? And then entering weddings where you felt like, well, I'm going to maybe try to, stage a little bit more, control a little bit more. Whereas obviously photojournalists, it's a little bit more as it unfolds. How do you find that you apply your background and skills into what you're doing now?
Well, it's interesting. I'm constantly looking and seeing, trying to figure out what am I seeing differently. I try to go to the venue before the wedding to check out to see what it's like first, to find those special nuances that I think the couple would like and what would be good for their pictures. So that on the day of the wedding, we get there and we're fully prepared. But weddings never happen A through Z, even though, there's a timeline and hopefully a wedding coordinator or a day coordinator, that sort of thing. sometimes a lot of that falls on the photographer too, especially if it is a smaller wedding. So, photographers need to be kind of ready to try anything, be very spontaneous. We all have the regular shots that we like to get, like you don't want to miss that kiss. You don't want to miss them putting the rings on. You don't want to miss the procession or the recession. But, I think photojournalism with me, with my background in writing and putting together stories, I try to find a theme in that wedding, and every wedding is different. And I try to build that story around that theme. Like, for example, we recently did a wedding that was in conjunction with an apple orchard, and we put their rings in the apple orchard. Really terrific, and took some really cool scenes of that. That's really different. A country theme with people sitting on hay bales. We have gorgeous Pacific Northwest scenery with beautiful water and that sort of thing. So I think anything that we can sort of pull the couple into, if they're willing, helps to make really beautiful pictures.
Yeah, and I love how you talk about, scanning, viewing. I feel the same way, but especially as a photographer, where video, it's a little, we're trying to get as a photographer, you can catch just that 1 microsecond, right, of life. It's hard, and especially at weddings and all this stuff going on, and you're trying to manage the timeline, and you haven't eaten in 10 hours, and you've been on your feet, and you've got, the mom asking you questions, but you're still trying to find these moments. And do you find that having that photojournalism background really helps you kind of weed out that noise and really focus like you need to?
Oh, it really does, because first and foremost, what the couple wants is number one. And we always have to be cognizant of their day. And even though I might have this terrific picture in mind, if they're stressed out or if the wedding is not going as planned as they would like to, you kind of have to throw that out of the window and sort of keep it in your back pocket and hope that things will turn around and that you can maybe convince the couple, hey, let's take 15 minutes and go try this shot, because I think you're really going to like it, because it'll go beautifully in your book and all these kinds of things. And I can just imagine blowing up a 20 by 30 metal shot for you and all of this. But, you can't think about what the photographer would like to put on the photographer's website. You have to think about the couple and what they're going through. And weddings can be stressful. I think a lot of couples, they want it to be really perfect. And there's so many weddings that are, but nothing in life is perfect. And there's all sorts of things that can happen. People can be late. I've seen weddings that the music doesn't work right. I've seen weddings that the officiant, something goes wrong and they forget the lines or something. And then people just start laughing and, everybody sort of calms down. And I've seen people trip and fall. One time when I was doing a wedding, I almost backed into candles that were burning. That's why we carry liability insurance. Luckily, that didn't happen. You can just imagine.
Yeah.
But, weddings, there's a lot of balls up in the air, especially if you have 250 people at a wedding. That's busy. There's a lot going on.
Yeah. And like you said, really, it's so hard, because keeping it the couple's day, right? And I think we're in the same point now. When I started doing weddings, it's like every single one, it's got to be perfect for the website. You got to have all this stuff, and maybe they want it, maybe they don't. And it's nice now, at least if I've found in the last couple of years, really just letting them kind of the day speak how they want it to be, right? And if we get to go do stuff, we were just at a wedding on Saturday, and like the photographers took them off again to do some night portraits just in the hotel we're at. And I'm just like, I'm just going to go let them do that. We're going to go get the dance floor. Like, do we need to get back in and get in the way, right, for them? Just let them go take their time, get those portraits. We can go capture the day that they're not going to be there. But, maybe me a couple of years ago would have tried to be running, okay, we got to go do all this stuff, right? We got to be in there and make sure we capture. So it's that, that balance between capturing what you need to capture and then also kind of giving them the day that they want. You know what I mean?
Yeah, absolutely. That's the beauty about weddings. And I think that's what's really nice in today. There's a lot of people that are willing to do first looks. And so when they're willing to do a first look, they see each other before the wedding. It's not traditional. And so a lot of those really cool, romantic, gorgeous, photojournalistic, creative styled weddings, pictures can be done at the first look after the couple has seen each other. And then you build in that cushion of time before they have to go do their ceremony and actually get married. A lot of those really great photos can happen then. It just depends. And it really helps, I think, Reed. I have found if you can meet the couple beforehand, I've done some weddings too that I don't know the couple at all. They've just reached out to me over the internet. They live in a different city. They're coming into this area for a destination wedding. They just don't have time, or their wedding coordinator or wedding planner is just doing the business for them. And I don't meet them until the day of the ceremony, you know? So it's tough if you don't have that sort of relationship with the customer to sort of inject your own idea, even though you know and you've got the background as we do as professionals to know that I know this client is going to want some gorgeous sunset picture, let's say, or a gorgeous picture there on the mountain with him, you know, or her reenacting, putting the rings on, or whatever it may be. You have to kind of keep in mind that the client is hiring you and trusts you to know that you're going to get that done. But, you know, if you have to kind of weave it into your own projection of time, sometimes that may not work. So, yeah. Flexibility, number one, you got to be flexible.
Yeah, it's tough. You know, the meeting the couples beforehand, you know, we always used to just be, you know, like email, maybe a Zoom call. We just booked one of the venues we have up here. They book like really, really far out, right? So we have like, they're not getting married till like 2023, right? And they're like, we gotta. And I'm like, okay, well, I mean, I don't care, right? But it was so nice because we were just at a different wedding show over the weekend, and they were there just kind of doing the engaged couple thing. But it was so nice to like see these people and be like, hey, we have, you know, years of a relationship we're gonna have even before your date. Where, you know, like I said, most of the time, yeah, no, it is just email or a phone call. I mean, at least now with, you know, the pandemic, we do the Zoom thing, but it's so nice to have that relationship going in. I really, like I said, I didn't know I needed that till now. And I'm like, man, I need that a lot more. Maybe I'm just getting older, but right.
Well, you know something, relationships are key, I think, in any kind of business. And I have found, in weddings with people, I've been doing weddings now for 15 years, plus or minus. You know, I'll meet the couple, we'll do an engagement shoot. They like what I do, and they'll hire me to do their wedding, or sometimes the engagement shoot is included in their wedding package. It just depends. And then they have this lovely wedding, and they're all goo goo gaga about the pictures, and it's great. Everybody's happy. And then, of course, they have babies. And they ask me, oh, Jolly, I didn't realize you do family, you do babies. Oh, yes, I do. So you're building that relationship over time. And I have several couples that I've worked with over the years now that I'm doing their family pictures. I did their wedding pictures. I did the engagement pictures. I'm doing their reunion pictures. Unfortunately, one person passed away during COVID. So they're doing a celebration of life. Yeah. So they're hiring me for that. I mean, there's all sorts of things. So it's all about, I think, really enjoying people and building that relationship as best as you can, and delivering a really great product.
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. That is, and I've probably said it before in here in the past, you know, that my biggest lament of being the videographer versus a photographer is you guys are so blessed to have all those more opportunities, right? Where very rarely it's like, okay.
Oh, but we need you too. We really need you too.
Well, but you know, but they either, you know, they get married, and then maybe their sister is getting married. But it's not so much like, okay, then we're going to have our baby shower, then we're going to have the, you know, the portrait sessions, and then, you know, the newborn and the school photos and the family photos. I mean, the need for a professional videographer is a little bit less sometimes than, you know, I'm always jealous of that with these photographers. They're, oh yeah, I see this family 6 times a year, and you're like, well, they don't need me that often compared to what they need you. You know,
Reed, I never really thought about it that way. Boy, we're going to have to think of some things that we can get you involved with.
but you know what I mean? And it's fine. Yeah. I mean, I take it what it is. But, you know, I mean, back to school photos, and then we do Christmas photos, and then we do spring whatever photos, and then we do, you know, it's the having a professional you know, if you go through your wedding and you like your photographer, having that professional photographer on speed dial isn't a bad thing to have.
It's not at all. As a matter of fact, we just went through a new iteration in my business, Jolly Sienda Photography, if I may. We just opened up a studio. I mean, I've been dealing remotely, and you know, everything's at the hotels, everything's at the park, wherever it is that they want the photos done. Sometimes they come over to my home, but I've never had a set space. I've always had to rent if people want that. So now we have that as well, which is really great.
So was that part of like a pivot in the last year, or was this kind of in the works already?
No, you know, this has been something we've been thinking about for a long time. I had all the special strobes and lighting equipment in Virginia. I used it a little bit in my house in Virginia, but I never had the right space. And so when we moved to the Pacific Northwest, when I moved back here, my life partner, he's from the East Coast. Luckily, we bought a place that had a little land, and we were able to enlarge our home and add a studio. We just got done. It was a 10-month project during COVID, believe it or not, during the pandemic. Started in June 2020, and we just opened the doors in end of February, March of 2021. Yeah. We added 660 square feet to our house. So it's great. High ceilings, strobes, backdrops, everything. I can do commercial work. I can do beautiful bridal portraiture. I can do babies. I can do whatever without fighting the weather. Yeah.
No, it's exciting. Yes, congratulations on that recent opening. That's good. Yeah, and we were talking before we recorded about, you know, the variety of things that you do, right? Where, you know, a lot of the, you know, even videographers I know that's like they do weddings, or the other videographers I know do corporate. Like we're very much in that, like where we kind of do an equal mix of both. And obviously you do as well. And looking on your website. Yeah. So besides weddings, what else do you focus on? And what do you like about those other things that you do besides weddings?
I love working with people that have small to medium businesses and they need imagery for their websites. And so we think about their brand and have a consultation first. So especially if I don't know them that well, I need to understand what their business is and what their goals are to reach on their website and how they're wanting their imagery to look. And so we figure that out together, and then we do a photo shoot with it. Sometimes it'll be several photo sessions. For example, a bakery that I worked with, we went inside her kitchen and she made a cake, and I'm taking pictures of her in action doing all of this with her products, that sort of thing, with her beautiful work. And then we did portraiture for her because she needed new shots for the local Chamber of Commerce. And then we went into her retail store, and she had 8 new cake designs. So I'm photographing every single design. Every single design is different. And then photographing her in action, working with clientele. So that to me is pretty rewarding. I like that. Not that I don't like weddings. I love weddings. Weddings are normally really happy and everybody is, you know, smiling, and some people are crying, but everybody is happy. But corporate work is very challenging. And, you know, I like to see the creativity of that come to life. It's
so undervalued how important it is to just have like kind of just a wealth of photographic whatever as a small business if you're building your website, right? And we're so many people nowadays, it's like, oh, I do Squarespace or I do whatever, you know, like Wix, and just having, you know, like where you could spend a half day or a day with them, right? Have all this stuff. And then, oh, I need to make a new page about whatever. Oh, here we go. I have all these wonderful photos. And it's so undervalued how much better that looks as a customer, right? Like looking at a bakery that had all these great photos and, you know, displays, and you can see what the owner looks like and you can see what the place looks like. Then, you know, it's one of those like, yeah, it costs a little bit more than having your friend do it or whatever, but it's one of those like, I just think, you know, you could do one session and then, you know, for 2 years you're set, right? You have whatever you need and you can build.
Absolutely. Yeah, content is so important, and vivid, beautiful content that speaks to your brand is so important. And one of the things that I've learned over the years that's very important, not just to my business and being found in the Google sphere, out in the universe, on the internet, but to anyone with pictures and with content that they want to put on their website, is you have to have metadata. And photographers, I hope that all photographers, I learned the hard way, and now I do this for all my clients. I put metadata embedded into their pictures so that when that picture goes out on their website, it will say XYZ company and what it is and keywords, and they are landscape experts or whatever it is. Yeah. So that's a help.
It's funny, yeah, because we were talking before we started recording about, why we do the podcast. And I said, I went to a wedding MBA years ago, and that's some of the stuff they talk about there. And you get these people, and they're like, I had no idea. And like,
I know, people don't know.
It's like this whole underground. It's like, no, actually, like that's a really big part of like everything. And like, do you have your address on your website? Oh no, I don't. Like, okay, well, let's make this list.
Huge. People don't realize that. So us as a professionals, you're in your videography business, and me as a photographer, that's something that you can have in your back pocket to always express with your client when the time is right, that you'll be giving them this in addition to the beautiful pictures. So it's really important.
What do you find the challenges of doing commercial versus doing weddings?
Yeah, well, commercial is an entirely different situation. I think commercial, the client really has, for the most part, an idea in mind of what they're looking for. And, they've obviously gone through your website to make sure that you're the right photographer to hire. As a photographer, you've got to be on point with your lighting. You've got to be able to have the right space. If not, you've got to be able to take your all your mobile backdrops and things to the client. For example, we worked with a major manufacturing company last year during the pandemic, and we took all of our backdrops to the client. They had a warehouse. We set up all the backdrops. We had a couple of different color of backdrops, taping it down with the appropriate tape there, bringing in all of our strobes, all those kinds of things. So that work, this happened to be catalog work, for example, photographing chairs and tables and this sort of thing for a new line that they manufactured. Pretty precise, detailed work. Not saying it wasn't creative. I really enjoyed it. It was different from photographing people and different from photographing families or weddings, for example. But just different. And then, of course, the client said, well, I don't want all these pictures. I want just 20 of the best pictures. So you send them 20 of the best pictures, and then they come back and said, oh, well, can you lighten this picture up? Or there's a little tiny blurb in the middle. Well, I'm thinking to myself, well, that was the way you manufactured it? No, I'm a photographer. I've got to be able to snap my fingers and, through editing, get rid of it. So yeah, there's that. Not to say weddings are the same. I mean, I have grooms and I have brides that come to me and say, oh, I've got this zit. Can you remove it, please? Or can you make me look 30 pounds lighter? Yeah. So there's that too. So I think you have to kind of set expectations.
It's hard. There's a photographer up here. We did a wedding, and the groom had like the gauged ear kind of things, and he like either had smaller, some and they looked like whatever. I mean, this is very graphic, but he's like, well, hey, do you want me to like clean that up in post? I'm like, why would you ever even offer that as a suggestion in the history of the world? Like, that's crazy time. But now that's what I like video, because I'm also OCD, but there's only so many things I can do in video, right? Whereas like photography, we can erase the sky and put pink unicorns or whatever. Like video, it's kind of, it is what it is, and it's a little bit more, we're in that structure,
That's true, but I guess you would call me as a photojournalist more of a realist photographer. If a client wants me to completely change the colors and that sort of thing, I may not be the right photographer for them. I'm okay with, I had one client, in fact, I've done everything for her engagement, her wedding, her boudoir, all these kinds of things, and maybe babies when they start having them. It'd be my joy. I had to go back to the drawing board in my own education about trying to complete the service that she asked me to do. She wanted me to get rid of all the color in the photograph and then just bring back one solid color. And I had to put my thinking cap on and think, I know how to do this. I've seen this. I've seen this particularly in England with the red telephone booths.
Yep.
And they bring out the red in the telephone booths and everything is black and white. But I had to go back and research this on the internet to figure out, how do I do this? And I was so pleased that I was able to do this. And now, I offer it. So thanks to my client. Thank you.
Well, and the other thing with a commercial versus like event, or I mean, even, obviously the weddings, but even like portrait sessions where it's a little bit more, we're in the world, right? There's only so many things you can control. When it is like a corporate, like we are setting up everything just for this shot. And if it's, and then if it's not perfect or they want something, then it is hard because you're like, and I do that all the time where I'm like, oh, I didn't turn off. You can hear the AC unit in the other building or something. Like, oh, I should have went and, turn, because when you're controlling everything versus at a wedding, you're like, well, that's, what am I going to do? Unplug the thing in the corner? I mean, it's the wedding,
Right. Yeah. Corporate is very different. I enjoy it and I'm very grateful when I get corporate work, but a lot of times you don't have the time to figure this out ahead of time when you're on set. You've got to kind of have all that background and all that research done before so that especially if the client is on set, maybe they're only giving you an hour. Maybe they're giving you 30 minutes. If you've got 2 hours, 3 hours, great. But sometimes you don't always have that luxury. Weddings, if it's a 6-hour wedding, you have time. There's things you can do. And, most of us are not shooting in film anymore. We're shooting digital. So take lots of pictures because you're going to get some really good ones out of, the bulk. But in corporate world, sometimes you don't have that luxury. So.
I want to switch gears. I want to hear about living in Germany and what was that like?
Oh, sure. Good. I lived in Germany for 8 years, actually. First time was 1986 to 1990. And that was the fall of the German Wall. And I got a chance to see that. I was actually in former East Berlin 2 weeks before the wall fell, which was really cool. And I did a lot of different things when I lived in Germany. And I learned photography in Germany because you're traveling, you're seeing Europe, all this kind of thing. So you have a camera. And the second time around in Germany was 2000 to 2004. And I got a chance to freelance with the European Stars and Stripes newspaper there in Griesheim, Germany. It was really terrific. And then it led me to another job working with the government there, being able to interview people for human research stories, build a story around the military community, and take pictures of what was going on. One of the funnest things I did was I got a chance to ride in a Huey Black Hawk kind of thing over in Grafenwehr and interview the soldiers and take pictures and write a story about what they were doing over there at the base in Grafenwehr training. It's a training base.
So were you working for an organization? How did that work out?
Yeah, so I was a government employee and I was in public affairs. And in the public affairs office, we had a relationship with the local Hanau newspaper for the military that covered 4 or 5 different bases. And so these newspapers came out once a month, I want to say. And so I presented a couple of ideas to the person that I worked for. Why don't we start doing more human interest stories about what's happening in the community, what the kids are doing, soldiers that are coming back from Iraq during the time, how families are dealing with separation, how families are dealing with reconciliation, all those kinds of things. And they like that. And so I got a chance to do a lot of really neat stories. And a lot of these things were published in this newspaper. And of course, along with it, I did the photographs. So.
That was through the military sending you over?
No, I was already living in Germany and I got this job. A lot of family members, when you're over in Germany or other bases like in Italy or wherever U.S. Armed Forces are, there are jobs available through Department of Defense, through military exchanges, through AFES, through non-appropriated fund. Various jobs, GS jobs and non-appropriated fund jobs. And so I was able to get a general status GS job based on my communications, education background, writing background, that sort of thing. And part of the job was writing stories and, oh yeah, you know how to do photography? Okay, great. Then you can be the photographer too. So it helped to have that kind of background and sort of built my own sideline in the job, which was great, which obviously opened doors for me when my ex-military husband and we were transferred back to Washington, D.C. And I was able to go to work in D.C. and utilize my experience.
Oh, I think that's fascinating. I mean, like I said, I spent a large portion of my life in news and, dealing, with a lot of, foreign correspondence and things and all that. I just think that's fascinating that you got to live over there and work. And
it was a joy. I loved it.
I can only imagine, the people that you got to meet in the stories and everything. That has to be such a fascinating chapter of your life that then to bring that back and all that knowledge and experience.
If I can share with you one of the coolest things, I was in a managerial position at Rhine Mine Air Base, and Leonard Skinner contacted Armed Forces News, Television, Radio, AFN, in Frankfurt, and they wanted to do a concert for the military. And so they contacted our base because we were closest, and I was the communications manager there. And I got a chance to spend an entire day with Leonard Skinner, and they actually played and performed for us there right on the tarmac. So it was a really cool experience, and that was in 2003.
And did you get to document that too?
I did. I wrote a little article. It wasn't People magazine, but actually we called it People in the News. And I have the article, and it's by Jolly Sienda, and it shows pictures of them that I took of the day, and then just a little, like 4 or 5 paragraphs of what went on and this sort of thing. So
that's awesome. Yeah, what interesting. Yeah, that's such a cool story.
Yeah, I have all this stuff in a drawer. I'm happy to share with you sometime, Reed.
I'm sure. And so then moving back to DC and starting there, obviously transitioning from living in Germany and film, photographing all that stuff to
big transition.
Yeah. I mean, what was that like?
Yeah. So then I went to work for the Federal Aviation Administration in communications, in writing. And I brought them my portfolio, what I did in Germany. And they said, hey, we're looking for somebody that can interview people here and tell their story in our local online blog for the FAA. And if you can, drill down and find out what they're doing and write about it and then take their pictures. So I wove that into my job. So that was a really neat thing that I was able to do. Again, keeping the photography going, keeping the portraiture skills and that sort of thing going. So I did that, and that opened up some traveling doors. I went down to San Francisco and interviewed some people. Majority of people I worked with were people that worked in the TRACONs, actually there at the airports that guide your planes in.
What'd you refer to it as?
TRACON.
Okay.
TRACON. It's the thing that's straight up, and they're watching all the planes come in and they're telling people how to land or when you can go, that sort of thing. It's a very stressful job. And these people have a lot of, really great background and history in flight. Some are pilots themselves. And so I interviewed quite a few people and created those stories about them and how their contributions are helping the FAA and helping the people that fly and keeping us safe in the air. Yeah. And then from there, I stuck with DOD, and then I met my friend Kenny, who at the, I told you we were looking at people flying in hot air balloons. And I met him, and he saw my style and how I was photographing. And then he asked me, he said, well, do you ever do weddings? I said, yeah, I want to do weddings. I want to be a wedding photographer. I don't really know how to go about it. And he says, well, I do them. So we got together and ended up doing a lot of weddings with him, which was great. So that really sort of paved the way for me to get into my own business in photography.
It was interesting to me, like I said, I was a news, videographer, transitioning, and what always struck me was, with news, it's very much like this organized chaos, right? And I'm sure you obviously, traveling and being
some of that, yeah.
It's like you're trying to just frame it the best you can with like everything going on, right? And so I always felt like transitioning to weddings, it was very much the same thing because everything's going on and you're trying to find, the right corner of the room to make it look good or deal with all the stress or, all these different things. But it still is, it was a very natural transition for me. I didn't know it would be. What was that transition like into the weddings field then for you?
Well, weddings are something that you only get really a couple of chances to get it right. Especially if you're the solo photographer, if you don't have knowledge about your lighting equipment, if you don't understand the ability and workings of your camera, if you're indoors and you don't know how to change the camera to the right setting, and you end up getting this really gunky, horrible yellow looking light, you're not going to work very long as a photographer. So there is a certain amount of pressure to learn if you're going to be going into this business as a wedding photographer. You better understand lighting, and you better understand your equipment and understand all the nuances and how the light changes naturally outside and versus indoors, and all of those kinds of things. It's funny. It makes me smile when I'll talk to a client and they'll say, "Oh, I'm just going to have my brother do the wedding," and I'm like, "Okay, good. Good luck with that." Maybe their brother is great, but I've also heard horror stories that people have had their relatives do their wedding photography, and they're like, "Oh gosh, I just really." We didn't have good pictures. So, there is, I take pride in all the years of experience and different things that I've learned over the years from other people that I've worked with, being a second shooter, and then getting enough weddings under my belt so that I felt confident and had the experience and had the pictures to be able to go out on my own and start my own. And, now, when a couple hires me, I mean, there's a big responsibility, and I feel, a weight of gratitude towards them for hiring me and trust, but also knowing that, I've got to get it right, because sometimes there's not a second chance. If you're not there at the right time, especially if you're the only single shooter, because they don't have a budget to have two photographers, and you miss that kiss when they're going in for it, you miss certain shots. Oh my goodness. Not good.
No. And it's one of those things where, hiring whatever, like when you get to a point where weddings, it's like, you're just breathing. You just walk in. Like, I don't need to think. I mean, I've been, my last year of my life has been live streaming all of these stupid things because, we couldn't do anything. And my life is cables and internet and all these things. And it was like, it's so nice to go back to just like regular weddings now as we're opening up, and not to have to think about anything again, and just being like, okay, this is what I do, and move through it, as opposed to, like you said, hiring someone and having to be on their own. And if something changes or they're not ready or something doesn't work right, or we had a photographer fly up from somewhere and she only had like one camera lens and the thing didn't work. And I'm like, you flew up here and you have one, like, you
always have to have backup.
It's like, what, so,
yeah.
But yeah, I just don't think it can be understated, just living through it and just having that wealth of knowledge. So.
Well, there are weddings that I've done the last couple of years here, and I've had things go wrong. But I carry 3 cameras with me, and I have like 4 flashes, and I have strobes, and I have, my assistant with me, and I have workarounds. But the equipment is equipment. Like if the car breaks down, the car breaks down.
Yeah.
Well, you better have second, third, fourth cameras in case, because things are going to happen. Rain. Cameras and rain, they don't go together. In May, we did 3 weddings in May, just starting to get going now from things opening up, which is great. And one of my cameras, shutter out. So got to get the other cameras going, That's what happens. That's part of doing business. And that's also why I think, people need to understand when they're hiring a wedding photographer, why we charge what we do, because our equipment is expensive, and our knowledge for those of us that have the experience to deal with all situations, because they're going to come up, we are worth it.
This has been fun. Is there anything else you want to make sure we touch on before we let you go?
I don't think so. I really enjoyed talking with you. Thank you for your questions. It's been great.
It's something that's this is a fun experiment, and it is interesting, interviewing all these wedding pros and being like, I never really just sat and really talked about what it is I do for this long, and why you like to do it, and the passions you get and everything. I think it sounds like a fascinating backstory and origin story, as I call it, to kind of get into everything now. But all the different experiences that you've gone through, shapes how you view things now and shapes how you capture things now. And this obviously handling, I'm sure like the stress of a wedding now compared to probably living abroad and doing these other things. Right. It's very interesting to see how everyone comes about. So.
It is. And I think, we all have a lot to offer people. And I think if you're just upfront and honest with people, and you have a website that shows all your work and great references and those sort of things, it's building that relationship and the trusted people. And we're all human. But you got to have your ducks in order and be prepared. And I am.
If people would want to learn more about you, who you are, what you do, see your work and everything else, where would you have them check out?
Sure. So I'm at jollysiendaphotography.com. So www.jollysiendaphotography.com. If you just Google Jolly Sienda, and it's spelled Jolly, like jolly, like Christmas, Sienda with an S, you'll find me. I'm also on Facebook, Jolly Sienda Facebook. I'm also on Instagram. Let's see. I'm going to be here with you, so there's lots of ways to find me. And we've been doing weddings over here on the Kits app now since 2015, so I'm pretty well known.
Well, that's good. Like I said, I appreciate expanding our web, expanding our our vendor pool and everything else, and joining this library. I really appreciate it. If you're like Jolly and you're interested in coming on a future episode, you can go to bestmadevideos.com/podcast guest. And that's a nice, easy questionnaire we have set up to get you in the system. Other than that, be sure to check back next week for another episode of Get to Know Your Wedding Pro. Thanks.
Thanks a lot, Reed.